I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Starship Troopers.
All right, but today we are talking
Yeah,
about Paul Verhoeven's, which I believe is the second Paul Verhoeven film we've done. The first one
yeah,
was RoboCop. Paul
yeah.
Verhoeven's Starship Troopers, which I just finished about 45 minutes ago.
God damn, you're always like you're like a high school student. You're like cramming before the test.
I don't mean to. It's just this
Yeah,
week
you're
has
busy.
been
I feel you.
nonsense because the kids had ACTs on Tuesday, which means
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
all
you don't
juniors
have
had to
to.
take it.
You don't have to. I get it. I'm just playing.
I know. I
I'm
know.
just
I
playing
know.
around.
We also don't have internet at school right now, which is great
Mm,
being a teacher, not having internet when the entire
yeah, they're fucked.
curriculum is built off that. It's wonderful. I
Oh
love
yeah.
it. But I did watch it, so I did the thing. I did the thing they needed to do. I did the homework right
It's
before
not really.
class.
I will say Starship Troopers, maybe not the best movie to watch early in the morning. I love it, but I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I mean, it might as well be late at night because it was still pitch black
Okay.
outside. Shit ton of snow, serious snowstorm here in Reno. We have over two
Oh,
feet of snow at
interesting.
the house, and that's only been in the last
Wow.
14 hours. And it's supposed to snow all day today. It's bad, man.
That's
It's,
amazing. I didn't realize that.
yeah,
We've gotten
mhm,
none of that.
that's
It's
nice.
supposed to be a high of 70 tomorrow.
Whew. That sounds, you know what's funny? It was 60 degrees outside like 2 days ago. So the Starship Troopers.
Yes, Starship Troopers, the Ghost. This is the best, one of the best movies ever made about fascism, ever.
It's definitely up there as far as fascism
Maybe the most entertaining one. Because usually movies about fascism are pretty dark and
and
scary and
depressing.
depressing, you know. But this one, it's so effective that I think like critics, I think at the time and I think even today, feel that it's a promotion of fascism
Yeah.
when it's definitely not. But it can, I guess I can understand maybe some people being confused, but that's their own fault, I think.
I think it has a similar vibe to RoboCop for sure in its views of the world, but I think in some ways it's even more not hidden or buried. I don't think that's the right word, but I think it's harder to see than in RoboCop. I think in RoboCop it feels more obvious than this. Not that this isn't, I mean, I think it's very obvious to see what is being said here and his ideas about fascism and violence and all these things, but maybe because it's more buried in the I don't know. I don't know, but I
Well,
think
okay, look,
it's
here's what I'll say about Starship Troopers. Here's what I'll say about Starship Troopers. This is like the fucking like fourth or fifth time I've seen this movie, so I'm
yeah,
well acquainted with it at
well
this point, I
acquainted.
would say. And I enjoyed it once again watching it. For me, like Starship Troopers, like I came to the realization watching it, it is like straight up like a I really feel like it's like a perfectly or near perfectly constructed movie in terms of the way that it's able to do the way that it's able to kind of like build up the world and to really kind of like flesh it out without doing anything too broad or obvious. Like there's a lot of things you can miss on the first watch through in terms of like what the world is like, what's going on, what are the politics like, what are people's dispositions. But the movie, I think, just does such a really great job at like kind of like giving you like little hints and little details that kind of sort of hint at the larger picture of the society and the of the Federation. It sometimes it feels obvious, but sometimes it doesn't. You know, there's such a long list of things and pieces of dialogue, images, you know, and I will say too, I think Starship Troopers is hysterical. I think it's really, really funny.
Hmm.
I love the commercials, like the television
So like
stuff,
YouTube, it's
bits.
almost like a YouTube shorts, like shoot YouTube videos.
Would you like to know more?
You see him like clicking around. It's so late
Yeah,
90s,
yeah,
early
yeah.
2000s. It's great. I love it.
Those parts are really, really funny. I like a man has been tried for murder. His execution tonight at 6. Like,
Live at 6 p.m.
that stuff is really live. That's yeah, that stuff is really, really funny. I love those like those are great because those are able to kind of like tie the movie together, those parts of it. Those parts are obviously very similar to the RoboCop TV commercials, the hysterical like television commercials. Both movies, by the way, are written by Ed Newmeyer. the screenwriter, and of course, both movies are directed by Verhoeven. I love the beginning parts of the movie because it feels like a 90210 CW show. It's so weird when you first start watching it. You're just like, what?
That those opening scenes and
At the high school.
the high school that feel, I mean, like you're saying, there's something so of the moment. I mean, it feels so 90s in the best of ways. Like it's really capturing the world of the night and television and film of the 90s in this incredible way. And yet at the same time, it feels hauntingly prevalent. And as you were pointing out, I think one of the things that Verhoeven is best at, and I think one of Verhoeven's strongest points of contention is his ability to world build. And when we talk about RoboCop, I'm probably going to reference RoboCop
Sick.
a lot because I haven't seen a ton of Verhoeven. I've seen this, RoboCop, and Total Recall, and I think that's it on my Verhoeven list. So
Those are his like
it's
science fiction movies, yeah, like
right.
his big ones. So
It's just big stuff. So it's, I'm vaguely familiar. And one of my big complaints with RoboCop when we talked about it on the podcast a couple years ago was I love the world building stuff a lot, and I wanted a lot more of that. And you get that here. I think there's a ton of really great
yeah,
world building without, as you point out, ever feeling as if it's an information dump. It never just feels like we're building a world to build the world. It just
no
feels like we exist in this world. And I think those YouTube or internet videos, whatever commercials, whatever they
television, yeah, yeah.
are great inserts. And I think they're used to really great effect in this because they are moving the story forward while simultaneously giving us an idea of how this world works. I mean, even that first one with the meteorite, it immediately explains how this world works and the aliens and everything going
Yeah,
on. And in this funny
yeah.
and weird and dark way, but we still don't feel as if it doesn't feel like narration, which is, I think, why it works so well because like very easily you have that like classic 1950s narration thing where they explain everything that's going on, or even the Star Wars, all the words going on at the beginning. I think
Yeah,
this
there's
works.
no scrolls or anything like
No,
that.
but you understand it
Oh,
immediately. I
it's
mean,
so good. And it's immediate, it's entertaining, it's funny, it's action packed. Again, I just think it's a perfectly constructed movie. Again, I'm watching it for the fourth or fifth time and I still am entertained by it. I'm still moved by it. I still find it interesting, fascinating. And look, I couldn't help, watching it, right now, I couldn't help but connect it to, just, there's definitely similar things going on with the current, events happening in the Gaza region. I mean, it really isn't that far off. It really is not. And we can, get into that, of course, just in terms of like what the movie has to say about war, fascism, authoritarianism, an authoritarian regime's like use of war to kind of like create solidarity, I guess, and to kind of like just forever kind of like propulse forward. Yeah, I don't know. There was some stuff again, like I said, there were some details and stuff that I picked up this watch that I never really like noticed or thought of before. And a movie like that is just so satisfying when that happens. You're just like, man, it really still has the juice. It's still great.
again, going back to that idea of how he built his world, and there's just so many of these little details that he never lingers on. We never linger on any of these moments,
No.
and yet they just make the world this entirely better place. I mean, even like this idea of a citizen versus a civilian, which we have basically two lines. That's it in the whole movie to describe a citizen
Yeah.
versus a civilian, and yet we understand so much from that. The idea that the only way to really participate,
Service guarantees citizenship.
and that's the only way you can become a citizen, right? There's not
Yeah.
another
You
way
have to
to do
you have to be in
it.
the service for like at least 2 years or something like
At
that. And
least
the
2 years.
service basically means like and it seems like unless you're really rich, which our main character Johnny Rico's family is, it seems like more or less everybody kind of joins the service or everything is kind of like wrapped up in the military in the service in war. And there are different levels, right? You can fly spaceships, you can be an infantry unit,
It's
be
basically
in the
ranked by
infantry unit.
intelligence. It's like a hierarchy.
It exactly, yeah. Like the Neil Patrick Harris character, he is intelligent and he also has psychic abilities.
Of course he does.
Which is kind of like, yeah, it's just like a science fiction movie. It's just like for some reason people in the world have psychic abilities. And he like immediately joining is like he essentially he becomes a colonel. You know, he becomes like a draftsman. I love the beginning of the movie because so Johnny Rico, who's our main character essentially, he is he's in class with Michael Ironside, who's a great character. One of my favorite details about the movie is that all of the adults in the movie are maimed and disabled, right? The Michael Ironside character, I think, has one arm. When
Mhm.
they apply to go into the service, they meet a guy who has like one arm and no legs.
That is a perfect moment. I love that moment.
Yeah. The science teacher, when they're dissecting the bugs, the
Yeah.
teacher, I think she's
She's
blind.
blind?
Like she doesn't have like yeah, she's like been blinded like while being in the service. All of the older characters are like dismembered. That's beautiful.
Is incredible. And again, it's just one of those details that feels weird in the moment and yet speaks to the way this world works, in which, unless you are the filthy rich, you have to serve in the military. I mean, there really isn't another choice. And then, like that moment where he's, giving his papers and they're all deciding, oh, you're going to be a pilot. And Patrick Harris's character, he's going to go and be a colonel or what have you.
Mhm.
I wish I could remember the line exactly, but he hands him back his paper and something to the effect of, one day you'll be a man like me. And then we cut to and we see that he doesn't have any
Oh no,
legs.
yeah, he's like the infantry unit made me the man I am.
Yes, that is. That's it.
And he's like, yeah, and he's like, he only has one arm and no legs, and it's like here's the thing about the movie though that I think kind of like throws people off. So actually, let me go back a little bit. I'm sorry. So I love the beginning of the movie because you have Johnny Rico. He's in class with Michael Ironside, who's a great character and a great actor. He's a gruff, great character. Again, there's kind of like this 90210 CW show thing where like he is in love with Denise Richards. Denise Richards is kind of lukewarm on him. And then Diz is kind of like their friend who's in love with Johnny Rico, but he's also not really into her either. So it's kind of like this love triangle thing. Love square because then another
Square.
guy kind of comes in, the other, kind of a pilot. And he's like in class and Michael Ironside asks him like, "Hey, like, what does it mean to be like a?" I think he asked him something along the lines of like, "What does it mean to be like a citizen or something like that?" And he gives him and he says like, "Oh, da 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 da." And he's like, "Yeah, that's like the textbook answer, but like, do you actually believe that? Like, do you actually believe, that being a citizen is important, that service is important to the Federation?" And Johnny Rico's like, "Well, I don't know." And that kind of like sets the movie in motion, right? Where you have Johnny Rico, who's essentially a blank slate. He's never experienced any strife in his life. He wants to do something, right? He's anxious to like finish school and get out of there. And he's asked straight up, like, do you understand like the implication and the importance of our military service in the Federation? And he's just like, no. And again, that sets the movie rolling where he does he really does experience that, right? By the end of the movie, like by the end of the movie, he's completely changed and he becomes the Michael Ironside character who's asking other people, do you understand like the importance of this? This is it. So I love that just right from the beginning.
Yeah. And there's this moment the parents are talking to him because he only has like two conversations with them. And it's very haunting and concerning that he basically joins the military to impress his not even girlfriend, really, just his
Sort of, yeah, like kind of
sort of
girlfriend,
sometime girlfriend
the
person.
Denise Richards
I mean,
character.
he's
Yeah,
literally willing to throw his life away, and his parents throw this big fuss about how the high school is basically
hmm
used as this recruitment center to enlist sort of these
yeah,
kids, right, and force them into military because you're tricking people who don't have fully developed brains. And it's something that I felt very deeply as someone who works in a school where there's army recruiters there 5 days a week, every single week. And they're not recruiting the kids that are going to college, right? They're not recruiting the smart
yeah, yeah,
kids.
yeah,
They're recruiting the kids
yeah,
that are convinced that this is their only option. And of course, they sell it as this if it's this big video game, and they only send, the most handsome men and most beautiful women to be the recruiters, right? It's not the people who are actually on the ground, fighting. It's it's
I'm
these
doing my part.
salesmen. And they're recruiting these teenagers, and you can sign a contract as young as 14 or 15 years old. When I believe once you're 15 you can sign a contract that you will join the military when you're 18, which is just mind-boggling. And I have
Yeah, I mean,
kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I have students who come up to me and they're like, this is what I want to do with my life. And I'm like, I'm not sure you quite grasp like what you're doing. They're like, oh, well, it's only like a 4-year contract. I'm like, yeah, but for like 4 years, like you're basically, under the control of these people, and coming from someone whose family's been in the military. My cousin just got out of the military like a year or two ago, and seeing like the way that he was treated in the military and the way that often people are
Yeah, that
treated
can change you.
within the military is it's
Yeah.
not great. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah.
One difference I will say though, one difference I will say that the Starship Troopers United Citizen Federation is that they essentially like live in a utopia, more or less. And I think that's where people kind of get kind of confused. One of my favorite details is when they're at the training camp, they're at boot camp, and all the men and women shower in the same room. There's never any sexist language. There's never any racist language. Like sexism and racism has been eliminated. I don't know about income inequality. That's something that's not really discussed too much. Although when Johnny Rico is there, that's the one thing I guess that people kind of like chide him about is that the fact that his family is rich. So I think income equality is like a thing that exists, although it's not. I don't know to what extent. I'm assuming it's how it is always been, I guess, for
How
a
it's always
while.
been since the beginning of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
yeah, I
mean,
mean, I think yeah.
yeah, I love that shower scene. Not just because you get to see a bunch of naked people, but
Jeez.
no, the
Yeah,
reason I
it's
love
a very
that
Hooven movie.
it's a very Hulu movie. You're gonna see some naked people, but the reason I love that scene, they go around the room and say why they're
Yeah,
there.
they say yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's only one guy who actually wants to be in the military, or like maybe two people. Most of them, like one's like, I don't
Hmm.
want to be a farmer, so I'm here. One wants to be a writer. One wants to be
Wants to
in
be a
political
politician.
office, a
Yeah,
politician. None of them actually want to be in the infantry. Like they're all there because they want
because it
something
leads to better
else,
opportunities. Yeah.
but they have to
Yeah.
do this to get there, right? This is their only path
Hmm.
forward. And I think there is
Right.
some income inequality stuff because at least in that
Definitely.
moment, you see that he's the only rich kid there, and he's really
Yeah.
the only kid that chooses to be there. I mean, there's kids who want to be in the military their whole lives, but he's really
They
the only
also
one
make
who
fun
makes
of him
that
that he's only
choice
there to be for like they also make fun of like the fact that he's only there because of like a girl, right? Like a
because
woman.
that's the only reason he's there,
Yeah.
which is awful.
Uh yeah. And again, again, they shower in the same room because there's not, there's no it
That's not even
sexism
a
has been
thought.
essentially eliminated. Yeah,
Yeah,
like it's racism, sexism has been eliminated,
that's
which it's
crazy.
that's great.
I
That's
mean, that's
great,
good.
but but it's the movie is trying to say that like yeah, like all these things and technology is another thing that is obviously vastly superior, right? The ability to travel through space. They have like Star Trek type spaceships.
Mhm.
Medicine and like surgery appears to be much better. People are able to get, incredible. Like people get injured and they get like,
Put in like a vat.
repaired. Yeah, they're put into a vat and they have like these like really like bad like wounds healed, pretty easily it seems, and people have like robot arms and things like that. So like the technology is also vastly superior. But all of this is the result of a of a like world and a human race that is essentially, as far as we can tell, in perpetual, never-ending war
Yeah. Oh yeah. And my kids just yeah.
against the bugs.
Against the bugs. And my kids, a couple of them just finished reading 1984, and one of the things that they were baffled with was in the book, there's this idea, and I guess the film too, that you were constantly at war. Like there's Oceania, Europa, and
Yeah, exactly.
whatever, and they're constantly at war with each other. And he's like,
Yeah.
"Well, I don't really understand how they're constantly at war." And I'm like, no, the war isn't real. I mean, in this case, the war is real, but it's not really about the war.
Yeah.
It's the idea. It's like the us versus them.
Uh-huh.
Like that's what
You
they're
need a
doing. That's what's
scapegoat.
happening here. It's a scapegoat. It's the same reason they're. I mean, they're not really
That's
killing
the point.
bugs, right? For any real reason. It's mostly just to keep.
What's the
Yeah.
reason why they're fighting the bugs, right? And here's another detail that I picked up while I was watching this movie for the show. like when he's talking with his parents the first time, they're like, "Oh, we should go on vacation to the whatever beach planet
The
or
outer
something like
ring.
that."
Yeah.
It's like the outer ring, and Johnny Rico's like, "Oh, I've always wanted to go there. That'd be great." And then he doesn't go. He joins the army, and then later on, they bring up that planet or that area or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, I've always wanted to go there." And then a guy says like, "Oh, well, it's been like wiped out." And that kind of gave me that kind of gave me the realization that's kind of a detail to kind of like say that like humans are colonizing the galaxy, right? Like we're colonizing these different places and planets to use as like vacation spots for rich people. And the bugs
Yeah.
are angry about that, right?
Shockingly.
So they're probably yeah, that's probably their planets and to use for whatever, they've been using it for. And again, and this is again, this has happened throughout human history. And so that's, that I think kind of gives you, this isn't discussed in the movie, but that kind of gives you a detail as to why maybe we're at war with them. And then it perpetuates itself, right? We fight the bugs because they're fighting us because they don't want us on our planet. And then people die, people survive, they get jaded, they hate the bugs because they're fighting back, they kill my friend, they kill my family, and it just like perpetuates itself, just this back and forth of, killing and bugs killing humans and then humans killing bugs, and it just continues to go on and on. And again, I like the Chris Hedges is a journalist and he has a book. I've never read it before, but I like the title, which is like war is like it's a war is a force that gives us meaning. And that's kind of the idea of like kind of like a fascist
Yeah.
kind of totalitarian. It's kind of like the old, like to have like a scapegoat. The war is like the meaningful part. It's like a part of the economy, it's a part of the culture, and but the results in the end are just a lot of death and destruction and needlessly.
Yeah, and everything in this world. I mean, we talk about the vast technologies and the prosthetics and the medicine and all this, but it's all not only built from war, but is also built for war. I mean, this entire system is built, and the scientific community, their entire thought process and goal is merely to commit more war. That is the only reason
Hmm.
anything in this world exists. Every single piece of technology is for the preservation and the continuation of violence and aggression, no matter what costs. And
Against the bugs. Yeah.
yeah, I guess I didn't think about that moment at the
Mhm.
beginning when you're watching that YouTube video and the asteroid comes in and he's like, these were
Uh-huh.
sent by the bugs, but I guess it was probably just a regular
That,
asteroid.
that's what I was about to
Yeah, and
bring
I
up that
think that's
detail too.
yeah.
This was something that I noticed too, where I was just like yeah, the asteroid hitting Buenos Aires, like yeah, like it fucking like a asteroid hits comes from the bug area, I guess, of the galaxy, and it hits Buenos Aires, Argentina, which is where Johnny, again, like that's kind of a weird detail that they live in Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
Like it just looks like a California, like it looks like a California high school, but they all live there now. It's kind of like another weird kind of suspicious detail. But
Mhm.
the asteroid comes in and it kills a bunch of people, and they're like, the bug sent it. Like the news is saying that. And like, yeah, I had the realization was just like, was it? Like that seems like kind of like a ridiculous thing. Like, so the bugs constructed or pushed or made this asteroid and sent it spiraling towards the Earth. I mean, it's happened before. Like random asteroids have hit the Earth and destroyed things in an instant. Like, why wouldn't it happen again? But they immediately say like it was the bugs. And Johnny Rico, I'm from Buenos Aires, and I say kill them all.
Mhm.
Like, it just the complete. Everybody runs with it. There's no question.
Yeah. And I mean, we do this all the time, right? We utilize natural incidents to create
Justify.
propaganda and
Yeah,
justify violence. And now I'm even wondering if that meteor or whatever destruction wasn't perhaps man-made and created merely for the perpetuation of violence. I
I
mean,
think
it
it's
could
the
be a natural
asteroid.
catastrophe.
I think it's the asteroid that Denise Richards avoids. Do you remember that? Like they're in
Right,
the
when she
spaceship.
and
I think it's the same one.
probably. Yeah, that's kind of
I think it's the same one. Yeah.
okay.
Um, I don't think it's man-made. I just think it's like random. It's in a random event.
Yeah.
It's unexplainable. But it feels a little far-fetched that the bugs had something to do with it.
Yeah, it's the constant need to have an explanation for everything that's occurred. And in this case, they utilize
Yeah.
it to their advantage to say the bugs have sent this
We got to
asteroid
we got to we got to go. We got to go to the planet.
and we
We
gotta
got to
kill them
go
all.
to Clendathu.
I think it's really great that it comes from the perspective of the mobile infantry. I think it's a really
Yeah,
interesting perspective to take, and not taking the perspective
it's
from
great.
the higher ups. Because I think often when we think of these films, we think of films about war. I mean, even great films about war. I think of the Stanley Kubrick film we watched close to a year ago now. The oh gosh, what's
Paths of Glory.
yeah, Paths of Glory. That film, we see all the layers of it, and we kind of go up and down that sort of hierarchy. And
Yeah,
it's not that you don't see the layers here, but it's through the eyes mostly of our mobile infantry. And so they
yeah,
have a specific idea of how the world works and their mission, right? It's like
yeah,
the difference between what we sell the Marines versus what you sell to sort of the higher ups, whatever
yeah.
you like, whatever infantry, whatever service you're in.
Occasionally we check back into Denise Richards.
Right.
Denise Richards is character who is like a spaceship pilot. So occasionally we'll see her do stuff as well, get into like scuffles, see what she's doing. But for the most part, it focuses on Johnny Rico and the mobile infantry unit.
Yeah. And so everything they do, they think there's this specific type of plan. And of course, we see that the biggest moment of this, I mean, his almost realization, I would say he almost realizes, but he really doesn't, is of course that moment when they invade that planet and learn that it was
Yeah,
basically a trap. I mean, it was basically just to see
yeah, it
if
was.
it was really there. And of course, we see that
Oh,
in the military all the time.
do you mean in the beginning or later on?
Later on, when they
Oh,
realize
okay.
that the smart
When they
bugs
go
are,
check out the outpost.
yeah,
Yeah.
the outposts. Of
Yeah,
course,
they go check out the outpost. That scene is so great. That's such a great action scene where they go to like the outpost that's been like everybody's been killed there except for like the general or whatever who's been hiding. And it was the bugs like yeah, they set off like a distress signal so they could trap him there. And so the bugs could just wipe him out. And that's to the scene where Dizzy dies. Which is
yes.
sad. It's sad when she dies. She's a great character.
Yeah, I love Disney, and I love I love the fact because you see this in a YouTube video earlier on that fort. It is a Mormon fort named Fort Joe, of course, after Joseph Smith.
I don't know if is that the same fort.
It,
I'm struggling to see if that's the same fort or
it
not. I think
looks
it
it might not be, but it looks exactly the same as that fort.
yeah, it's like a fort. It's like it's a fort a thing like on like the
Yeah,
alien
like
planet
an on and
for
alien
whatever
planet.
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's just a funny detail because I live so close to Utah.
yeah.
So, Salt Lake City, of
Right, yeah,
course, with Joseph Smith,
yeah.
and there's tons of Mormons.
That's funny. Yeah,
It's so
that's such a
specific and
funny like
little.
little joke. It's a very joke. It's a good joke. Yeah, yeah. And of course, like the movie, as you would expect, is very violent. Very violent. People getting maimed, dismembered, shot, explosions. I don't
Violence
know.
looks great. I mean, every time someone's like head gets
It's
cut off
great.
or someone gets cut,
Yeah, dismember. Yeah,
those prosthetics look amazing. I mean, the blood looks
yeah.
so great.
I think the CGI too looks pretty decent.
Solid.
They will use like practical like alien effects and stuff like that. Like that scene in the beginning where they're like opening up that bug like at the school.
Oh
That's
God.
obviously like a
Well,
practical. That looks
yeah.
great.
Great
I know,
practical
like
effect
Denise
though.
Richards, she like Denise
She
Richards, they have her
vomits
like
right
throw
into
up.
it.
She vomits. Yeah, that's funny. And but of course when they're doing like really big, huge giant groups, crowds of bugs, they use CGI, and it's fine. The CG, I think the visual effects are done by Phil Tippett, who did like the CGI for like Jurassic Park and stuff like that.
Okay. I think it's very strong. I think the CGI, and I
It's
think
fine, yeah.
the combination of CGI and practical effects works well. I mean, of course, there's films with better CGI, but honestly, we've seen films recently that
It's
have worse
fine.
CGI than what's in this film, and this film's almost 30 years old now, so
I mean, this film, yeah, no, you're saying like, yeah, like this film probably has like better, at least more, I guess, cohesive CGI than like a movie that probably came out of theaters the other day.
Yeah. More thought and time was put into it than and it's in no way ever distracting to the film either. I don't think there's ever a moment where the
I don't think
CGI is
so.
concerning or anything. I think it's because most of the time when they use CGI, they utilize it for the aliens and these different creatures. And so because they are so
Right.
unfamiliar looking that it doesn't really matter that they have this sort of video game-esque kind of look to them. I think it works in his
It's
favor
fine.
because they're
Yeah.
so alien looking. I think it works. And also the brain bug guy,
That's like a practical one for the most part. Yeah. That one's
that
like
one looks
mostly
amazing.
practical, I think. That one, yeah, it
It's
looks
got to be
great. It
mostly
looks so
practical, but
disgusting and it's like
it
moist.
looks right out of Dune, doesn't it? Like just something you would see
It
out of Dune.
does. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. When he like puts his like puts like his like a spike up in the air to
Oh
like hit
God,
him in the brain.
those
That's such a
eyes.
great moment. Yeah. What a
It's
great
really smart.
effect.
I think it's great that they put eyes on it, and I think they did this on purpose, right? It's to create emotion because you see that in their eyes because that's
Yeah.
you can see
You
eyes.
kind of feel bad for them.
You
They
do, right?
can't
That
speak
moment when
because
Neil
like
Patrick Harris puts his hand on it,
he's afraid. That kind
and
of
they
like
all
sums up the
cheer.
movie. That part is so that's like one of the most iconic scenes in the movie where like he picks up on the fact that the brain bug is afraid, right? And everybody cheers. He's afraid. It's afraid. We did it. Like, it's that's such a baffling moment. I could see people being like, "What? He's afraid? What?" Like it's such a funny thing to cheer about, but again, like it's just all about like the subjugation and violence and destruction of these alien creatures, and throughout the movie, you can pretty much pick up on the fact that they know nothing about the alien
Absolutely.
race. They know very little, and they come to the conclusion like halfway through the movie that they're quite intelligent and they can do like intelligent kind of things, right? Typical scapegoat stuff, right? Typical like, the bugs, they're, destroying our way of life. They are dirty, disgusting,
Savages.
ugly.
Yeah.
You know, they need to be eradicated. There's a scene where like it's like the bow tie guy like doing like the interview
That's exactly what I was
like
thinking
on
about.
a
They're like
TV
almost
program.
Fox. It might as well be Fox.
Like a Tucker Carlson like
She
he's like, I
suggested,
find yeah, I
yeah,
find the idea of a bug with a brain offensive.
offensive.
Oh God.
God, there's so many moments like that that are just
Yeah, there's a lot of that
so
stuff going on.
so perfect. I love the design too of those spaceships, like the really big ones and the small ones. They all look really cool. Like just like all the
The
different
military gear is great too.
military gear is great. Their uniforms, all
The
those like
helmets is very
grays
iconic.
and blacks, very classic
Hmm.
fascist stormtrooper. And I say stormtrooper
Yeah,
not as in like Star Wars stormtrooper. I mean like
I know
actual
what you mean.
Nazi stormtrooper.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and the other thing too, like in case like again, once again, I don't understand how people can be confused about the movie because like, when Neil Patrick Harris, like he's gone from the movie for a while and he re-enters it. He literally when he enters the room after being gone from the movie for a while, he's like in a fucking Nazi uniform. Like he's in a fucking Nazi like officer's like uniform that you would see in like Indiana Jones or something like that. Like
mhm.
the movie is very clear that the humans are the bad guys. They are Nazis essentially.
Yeah, which I remember when we talked about this film in the past and how the alt-right has kind of taken this film as their own.
Maybe you're thinking of something else. I don't think that I don't think people have taken this. The alt right has taken the movie as its own. It's just people like it just seems to generation after generation just seem people seem to be confused about it. Um, and they think that it's an advocate. They think that it's advocating for like fascism, and that's like the people's criticism of it, right? Or or I guess like I actually I will say recently I guess I've seen like people like right-wing provocateurs on Twitter like so like they're completely disingenuous making tweets like oh actually this is awesome. This is awesome. I don't see what's wrong with it, And it's like and the movie is like action packed and the things that people do in it are in a way heroic, right? But again, you got to think about like what's going on, what are they doing, what, what's the benefit of being at war for like a totalitarian, authoritarian society. But some people, they just can't
Well,
seem to do that.
I think part of the reason people are confused by this movie is we our protagonists, right? Our heroes of this film are all the bad guys, right? They're all the evil people that do evil things,
Yeah,
and we
they're
don't.
evil.
And what's hard for us to see is that they're not like innately evil beings. I mean, this isn't like a David Lynch, pure
No.
evilness. This is the evilness of not of
Hmm.
their own ignorance, right? They can't see their own evilness. And so we
Right.
too, right, we follow people like Johnny Rico and we root for them and we want them to survive and to live because they seem to be
Yeah.
genuinely good human beings who want to do things that are good for mankind. But by doing that, they've created, well, not created, but continuate and perpetuate
They're taking part
fascism.
in. Yeah. 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 And and Johnny Rico, he's kind of, when his parents die, of course that, spirals him for the rest of the movie, right? Into where he's just like he's doing some heroic things where he's jumping on top of the backs of bugs and stuff like that. Like he's really good at it too, right? Like he kind of realizes that he's actually like quite good at being a mobile infantry unit and fighting bugs. He's talented at it, just like Denise Richards is talented at flying spaceships and things like that. Um, and that, I'm sure that is that can be satisfying. That can be a satisfying experience, right? Again, it's the result of these talents and actions, though, are killing these bugs, which obviously there's a reason why they're just like bugs and not like, I don't know, a human like. It would probably be a mistake if like instead of bugs they were like human like aliens.
Yeah, I think it's obviously very purposeful that they make them the most disgusting looking creatures that we can think of because it's easier to
Right,
set apart ourselves from that. I think if we were to
right.
utilize, human-like aliens, it'd be much harder to swallow. So, eh,
Yeah,
but of course, the idea is that okay, we kill these, right, we first off we kill the ones that like don't think, they're just like they're infantry, right? We kill those off, and then there's these other bugs, and now there's the brain. And of course you can see where this pattern is going, right? These creatures are going to become more and more human like, more and more human-esque, but we're going to continue to find ways in which we're going to dehumanize them in these ways. Or I guess dehumanize isn't perhaps the right word, but somehow lesser than us, right? We're always going to perpetuate this idea, and they start by getting the ones that are the least, right, human like, and they slowly work their way up the chain until of course the day comes when suddenly they're taking over basically humans, which I mean, I guess towards the end these creatures aren't really that any different than humans, other than the fact that they look really gross.
right. And that's probably the best scapegoat imaginable, right? For any kind of like war mongering society is a scapegoat that looks nothing like humans at all. Um, but when right, and so you can kind of there is that forever there will forever be that separation between the fact that they don't look like us and that they don't speak English and that we can't understand them or anything like that. And that, and like you said, the more we understand them, the more that we're able to kind of like see ourselves in them. That's kind of the same thing with like animals are on our own planet. But it doesn't matter because we have to continue to keep killing them. And when the movie ends, it's like, what, like, there's not even any like really like satisfying, like, now we're going to do this. What they're going to, so they're going to torture the brain bug horrifically for whatever reason, for whatever they need. Um, and yeah, it's just like, it's just, they'll keep fighting and they'll win, you know, it's just there's no end in sight at all. It's just they will keep fighting. That's kind of the point.
What do
It
they call
it
it?
it,
It's like
it
the they don't call it the road to victory, but there's I remember like words come up at near the very end, and it's something similar to that. The idea that they already won, but the fight continues on, right? it's like
Yeah.
the fight to victory or something like that, right? Like it's just
I like too, like, yeah, yeah. I like too, like the use of like children and stuff in the propaganda, right?
like the one with
Like
the
the very
guns.
beginning, they're like, "I'm doing my part," and they have like the little kid who's like, "I'm doing my part too." And yeah, they're giving guns to the kids, and they're having them like stomp on the bugs. And then like towards the end, when they're like gonna do like the final like fight right of the movie, they're like teenagers because everybody else has been killed. Like so they're just like recruiting, like straight up recruiting like teenagers to like aid in the battles. Yeah, it's yeah, you're right. Like at the end, it's just like the fight continues. But there's like there's no end in sight.
Yeah, and that's what's so terrifying is there's no lessons learned here. There's no character that at the end of the piece is like, well, I don't know about this whole fascism
Right.
thing.
There,
They've all bought
there's
into it.
never no. Right. And Johnny Rico is completely changed from the beginning, right? That's why I love kind of like him, like at the beginning being like, well, I don't know. Well, now he knows, right? Now he knows what citizenship, what's military service is all about. Because he's experienced it. We've been there with him. We've seen him, do all these things. He's a great character, but it's like he's a completely, again, he's a blank slate at the beginning, and he ends up being a completely hollowed out, just kind of war machine. And it's sad to see.
Well, we've been talking for about an hour. Um,
It's such a hard movie to talk about because you could go
I
on
feel
and
like we've
on.
just
There's
brushed
so
the
many good
surface of this movie.
there's so many good like lines and details and stuff in it. It's so good.
Gosh, yeah, I always I always have this weird reaction to Verhoeven's work, and I think it happens every time. And I think it happened more so with this one, even though I perhaps knew more going into this than I did Total Recall or RoboCop, which is I don't know if my interests necessarily lie in all the killing of bugs and the violence and that sort of stuff and like the shooting. I mean, of course, there are those types of films which I love, your kung fu movies or your John Wicks or that sort of thing, but that's not typically something that appeals to me. And those moments to me always are like the least interesting moments. I mean, I know they're like core to this piece and to this film,
Yeah.
but still, again, going back to RoboCop, those moments that I love the most are all of those world building moments and just how funny this movie is and how clever this
Yeah,
movie
it's really
is.
funny.
Yeah. So, yeah, those kind of like wrap up my final thoughts, as it were. I mean,
Yeah.
really, really enjoyable film and just some of the best world building. I think no one really builds a world the way Verhoeven does. They're just so imaginative and original
So good.
and not like anything else that I've ever seen. And great performances overall. I always think it's weird. I don't know why. Whenever I see Neil Patrick Harris, that always throws me off 100% of the time, no matter what role he's in. There's just something about Neil Patrick Harris that just, not that he's a bad actor by any means. I think he does a perfectly fine job
He's
here.
okay. He's good in this movie.
I think he's just so like his name is just so recognizable that there's just something about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I give this film a very, very, very strong 6 out of 10.
What? I don't
Yeah,
understand that.
I know. I just I don't really like all those moments where they're like fighting bugs. I just don't. That's just not my thing. And I just don't really like connect to those moments. And I just don't find
Hmm.
myself very excited by those moments. But everything else is
Okay.
so great that and
I don't know. I like the action. I feel you. Maybe it's a little bit of a bloated movie. For me, it's a 9 out of 10. I still think like RoboCop is his like best movie, at least among like his science fiction films. I used to think that like for me, the ranking used to be RoboCop, Total Recall, and then Starship Troopers. But I've seen Starship Troopers probably more than any of the other movies.
yeah.
So I think Starship Troopers is at least as good as Total Recall, if not better. Just because I find myself going back to it all the time. It's just a very like fun movie to watch. And I like the action. I think it's beautiful, amazingly directed, Verhoeven action scenes. Um, it's maybe a little bit bloated. I think like I was talking about how like perfectly constructed it is. I think RoboCop is maybe like 10% more better constructed. than Starship Troopers. It's a more tight movie than Starship Troopers, which is already really like quite tight. Um, so I kind of see where you're coming from, just because like maybe it's like a little bit bloated with all the action scenes, but again, I think like there's no other movie to like really kind of like pin down kind of just like the current moment. I really do believe that. I know some people will look at Starship Troopers, like they'll look at the poster and be like, this movie, like this is like trash. Like this is action movie, 90s bullshit schlock, like mass media, like a movie for the masses. It's really not like that. I think like this movie, along with like the RoboCop as well, speak to the times maybe better than anything else. And again, considering the Palestinians who've tens of thousands of Palestinians that have been like murdered now at this point by the Israeli government, aided by our own government. I couldn't help but think of that during watching this movie, just the idea of the scapegoat, the idea of propaganda, the idea of like never-ending conflict and war, colonialism. It's just all kind of wrapped up in there. And, to me, like it's just so clear and it's so precise. And yeah, I love the movie.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
I'm on Letterbox at Retro Andrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at With Nothing to Say. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks again.